Good morning. We are looking at the February 2021 Bouquet of Hope paper pumpkin. Before I show you my alternatives, I wanted to show you how I did the 3 cards in the kit. Now, in the directions, it will tell you how to make all 3 cards at the same time. I only made 1 card at a time. It works better for my brain. So the first one I did was the one on the left, and you use one of the paper, the bases. You use one of the doilies, and it's glued down flat, and I just glued it in the center because it's a solid mass. Then you stamp your sentiment on one of the labels. You bump it up with dimensionals, add the little sequins down at the bottom and at the top. And for mine, I added the ribbon or the twine down in the lower left-hand corner because it made more sense to put it there than to put it right in the middle, and you wouldn't be able to see it. On the inside, I just stamped the sharing in your sorrow sentiment. So pretty little card, easy to put together, sweet to send out to somebody. The second card is I'll always be there for you, and it's on the right-hand side of the picture. What I did for this one is very simple. I just glued down the bumblebee piece about 1/3 of the way up, flat. Then what I did is I bumped up this pretty bouquet and laid it on top. And then for my sentiment, I stamped my sentiment, and then I put 1 dimensional on the right-hand side, laid it down, and then put a little glue underneath it where it's overlapping the bouquet, since the bouquet is already bumped up. Again, just added the little sequins, and that's the card. Very easy. The last card was a little bit tricky for me, and I just wanted to explain it to you. You have a piece of vellum, and the vellum is actually bumped up on the card. You can see it's got a little dimension here. And you don't want to just put the dimensionals all over the vellum because they will show through. So the way I did this card is I started with just the piece of vellum first. On the vellum, I bumped up this little flower piece, and I bumped up this little flower piece. I laid them on the vellum before I put them on the card base. Then what I did is I could see where it would be covered by, where the vellum would be covered by the floral pieces. So then I put the dots, the raised dots underneath these on my vellum. So then I could lay my vellum on my card. Then I took and used the Thinking of You piece that already has the sticky on it, and I placed it flat on the vellum here. It overlapped the little rose piece over here, and then I added this little piece at the very end, and I bumped it up so it overlapped the Thinking of You. Again, very simple card once I got to thinking about it, but do your embellishment on your vellum first, then flip it over, put the dots on it, the dimensionals on it, and then you can lay it on your card base and it'll stick to the card base. So you'll see the card base is, the vellum is loose until you get to those little dots, those little dimensionals, and they work great because they're underneath the floral pieces. Okay, so that's how you do the kit pieces. So now let me show you what to do with the cards, the alternative cards that I came up with. So for the alternative cards, I used the Field and Flower DSP, and I also used this celebration set called Heal Your Heart, and I'm using this thank you down here for the thank you cards that I made today. So in your kit, your first card, you're going to make this really cute fold-out card. And for this card, you have a piece of DSP that is cut 11 3/4 by 5 1/4, and then it is scored at 1 3/4, 4 3/4, and 7 3/4. Then you just simply lay it back on itself to create the card, to create the fold out. What I did is I glued the inside of the 1 1/4 inch side and held it down. So I got this effect. Then I took my 2 pieces of white cardstock and I decorated the outside. So I used the thank you and then the blooms from the set. I added some of the sequins. I colored this with the Stampin' Blends, but really you could use your watercolor markers. You could use your watercolor pencils. You can use your regular markers. You can use anything you have on hand. So use your imagination to add some color to your card. And you'll notice too, I was not perfect in that coloring. And I think maybe that's the key, is not to be perfect. So keep some white space in there. Kind of give it a loose feel, and I think it's prettier than solidly trying to color in the whole thing. I glue it onto the front, only on the left side, and then I put glue all on the back of the inside piece. I put it underneath my original, my top piece, and I laid it down on my card, so when I lifted it up, it was affixed to the inside. And I created a card base, an actual base, by taking one of the card bases from the kit, cutting it in half, and simply gluing this whole thing onto the base. So you've got a little bit of a peekaboo of the Rococo Rose at the bottom and the top. So that's card number 1. Very easy. Okay, for card number 2, I again used the Field and Flower DSP that was suggested in the kit. And I made an easel card. And so for this easel card, again, I took one of the card bases and cut it in half. And so I used actually the solid back side for this one, and I glued my card base. I glued my layer of DSP onto the card base, and then I took this little piece of cutout that I made for you, and I stamped on the outside. So I did the thank you on this, and then I did the bouquet again. Again, I wasn't real accurate with my coloring, and that's okay. I think it looks better that way. I also took some pool party and I outlined the bouquet. It just gives it a little bit of interest. And you open it up and you write inside the card. And I just glued this smaller card onto the base. Now what makes it an easel card is you have a piece of 4 1/4 by 2 1/2 piece of Whisper White, and it is scored at 1/2 inch. I glued that on the back so it stands up like this. So it makes a cute little easel card. Nothing difficult at all on that card. These are all actually very easy cards this time around. I hope you like them. The next card, you have a white base, and you also have another piece of DSP. And what I did is I bumped the DSP up on dimensionals. I laid it on the white card base. I took one of the doilies and I cut it in half. I used half the doily to glue it flat onto the base. I then took one of the labels and I stamped thank you on it. But again, you can stamp whatever you like. As a matter of fact, I gave you some labels to play with this time, so you could easily change it to that was sweet of you. You could use a different kind of thank you if you've got that in your kit. You could simply make it a hello there. So any of these cards, you can change out the labels, and I gave you alternative labels to play with this time around. I glued that onto the doily. I added the little twine, and again, the way I made the twine is I probably took about 18 inches, cut it, folded it in half, and cut it again. So then I had 9 inches, 2 pieces of 9 inches. I held it in my hand and tied the bow together, so I had a double piece of twine. I added 3 of the sequins at the bottom, and then I took the stamp that's in the stamp set, the cluster of 3 flowers, and I stamped it off 3 times in black. I added some bumblebee yellow to mimic the yellow in the flowers on the front. Easy peasy. The last card is I call a tear card, and I really like this this way to create cards very quickly. So in this case, I took the 2 pieces of DSP. They are 4 inches by 3 inches, and you'll see they're both the same. And what I did is I just turned one over, and what I actually did is I ripped this. So I'm going to just rip this piece right here. You've got this great little interest of white. So what I did is I glued this piece down flat, and then I glued this piece over it flat. Then I added my label. I'll always be there for you. But again, if you wanted to do a different style of label, you certainly could do that. Put whatever you want it to say there. I added one of the little floral pieces flat at the bottom, and I bumped this one up by just gluing it onto the top of my label that is bumped up with dimensionals. And on the inside, I took that piece of ripped paper and I glued it down on the bottom, so it makes a little interest in the card. So there you go, your 3 cards and 4 alternatives. Hope you like them. Bye-bye.